I think it's one of the only books that talks about these big freshwater fish on a global scale. And we really tried to tell the whole story from beginning to end. It starts in the Mekong, where I started my work, and then we go through the U.S. into Europe, through Asia, Africa. So it's a global adventure, and that's one of the reasons that it took such a long time to write. It wasn't just sit down and ping it out. We were going out in the field, and we were taking trips as we were writing.
This is the Tom Rowland Podcast. Fascinating stories to amaze, encourage, and inspire you in fishing, fitness, and the outdoors. And we're brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee. I started this podcast as a way to connect with my friends, people that I admire and respect, and you. It has been a learning journey that's made me a better person, a better fisherman, a better father, and a better athlete. I'm so happy that you're on this journey with me, and I'd love to hear from you with show suggestions, guest suggestions, or questions. The best way to get a hold of me is through text. You can text 305-930-7346 for the fastest response, but if you prefer to email, you can send that to podcast@saltwaterexperience.com. That's a dedicated email address just for the show. If you like this show, you can show your support by posting about it on social media and tagging me. Text the link to a couple of friends that may also enjoy it, and subscribe and leave a 5-star review if you feel like I've earned it. The website is tomrowlandpodcast.com, and that is where everything lives. All past shows, you can go and listen to any show. You can look up all the different shows that we've done, both the How To Tuesdays, the full links, and the Physical Fridays. They all live on tomrowlandpodcast.com. And the social media is Tom_Rowland, ROWLAND, on Instagram, or you can go to our big account, Saltwater_Experience. I hope to hear from you soon. So now, let's get on to today's show.
I'm Zeb Hogan, author of Chasing Giants in Search of the World's Largest Freshwater Fish, and I'm on Tom Rowland's podcast.
All right, Zeb, how you doing, man?
Good. Glad to be with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for doing this. You got a new book out, huh?
Yeah, so it's coming out in April, called Chasing Giants in Search for the World's Largest Freshwater Fish, all about trying to find and figure out which kind of fish is the world's largest in freshwater.
Have you figured it out yet?
Yeah, so it took a long time. So the book starts with the catch of a 646-pound Mekong giant catfish in northern Thailand. And that was in 2005. I was working with fishermen there, part of my PhD dissertation, and the fishermen caught this 646-pound fish. And I was there. The fish ended up being killed and sold for food. And I just asked kind of a question that I thought I'd be able to find a simple answer to, which is, what is the world's largest freshwater fish? And it turned out to be a more interesting and complicated question than I thought.
Well, I guess what's the definition of a fish? I guess you've got these giant freshwater stingrays. You've got other big catfish. You've got all kinds of other things. You've got big bull sharks that go from the saltwater into freshwater. I mean, it is pretty complicated. What were the challenges of trying to figure this out?
Yeah, I think so I started out, sort of just got online like anyone would, started Googling it. And what I found pretty quickly was that there were a lot of records or a lot of claims of the world's largest freshwater fish. And so one of the claims that was true was the claims of very large beluga sturgeon in Europe and in Russia. And so those beluga sturgeon can get a couple thousand pounds, but they move from salt to freshwater. Mm-hmm. So for my work, I wanted to focus on fish that were exclusively in freshwater. And so there were a lot of claims of big fish everywhere. I sort of realized pretty early on that I was going to have to go to these locations, talk with local scientists, talk with local fishermen, get out on the river myself, and actually see these fish with my own eyes. Because there were a lot of stories out there that were exaggeration. You know, fishermen like to exaggerate. So there are a lot of stories out there, and I sort of had to figure out, okay, which of these stories are based on the truth and which are tall tales.
Right. And then, of course, like myths, like urban myths and stuff like that. Oh, there was a catfish that ate somebody, like years and years and years ago. And then that story gets embellished. There's, I don't know, cave drawings and all kinds of things of this giant thing, which maybe it was big. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that is
how
we do it.
Every region has stories about big fish, big mythical fish.
Uh-huh.
But most of them are probably based on something that was really in the water.
Yeah. Yeah. And so was this question and this pursuit of finding the world's largest freshwater fish, did that lead you to the show, Monsterfish?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been a research professor at the University of Nevada in Reno since 2005. That was about the same time that fish was caught, the same time that I asked this question that I thought was going to have a simple answer, and has basically turned into my research program at the university.
Oh, cool.
And so we filmed the first episode of Monsterfish with National Geographic in 2007. And we filmed right up until COVID. And we haven't filmed since COVID, but I think we're going to start filming again later this year.
Wow. How many episodes would you do a year?
It really depended. So the first year we did 2. The year after that, we did 4, then we did 6. I think the most we ever did in a year was 7 shows, and the least was 1 or 2. So it really varied. The shows I was, trying to also had a job at the university. The shows, I don't know what format you use for your programs in terms of the amount of time, but for the shows that we did, Monsterfish shows, they took between 2 and 3 weeks to film. Yeah. So quite a bit of time.
That's what I was gonna ask you about that, because I've been doing television, fishing television for 18 years now, and our shows are 22 minutes and 30 seconds, and we'll film 12 episodes, or some years are 13 episodes, but mostly the average is 12 episodes a year, and we do not take 2 weeks to do the show. But I know that like National Geographic, Discovery Channel, different shows, different networks have obviously different budgets and different criteria for what you're doing. So can you tell me like why, I'm super curious of like how many people you take on something like that, and why it takes 2 to 3 weeks to film a show. Are they hour-long shows?
They're 48 minutes, so they fit in an hour, with commercials and stuff. And so I'll give you an example. The show we filmed in Mongolia on giant trout, fly fishing for giant trout. Yeah, Taiwan. Yeah. So that was a good show. But almost all the fish that we film are rare. Mm-hmm. And we're also interested in finding big fish, not we want to find a fish that's, the focus of the project was over 6 feet or 200 pounds. Mm-hmm. Not all of these fish, we didn't find a taimen that big, but we're looking for an example of how big the fish that we're focused on can get. And so for Mongolia, we went over, usually we have a crew of 5. So it'll be myself, 2 producers and 2 cameramen. And the cameramen, usually there's one, this might be different than I'm not sure if you guys have a underwater cameraman. Yeah. So usually one of our the cameraman would be above water, and he would be doing the sound and all the interviews and above water stuff, and then would have someone in the water who could get the fish, in action. And that I really like that. Made the show more dynamic. It also gave us a chance. Sometimes rather than fishing, we go diving.
Yeah, sure.
Or we'll be using different types of fishing gear. We can put the camera on the fishing gear and see what happens. So I like having both.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we have, and we do some double duty too. Like usually our camera boat driver is also our underwater guy, and our still photographer is also our drone guy. And then we have two cameras, above water cameras all the time. But similar kind of deal. Not 2 producers though. What do 2 producers do?
One of the producers figures out all the logistics, and the other producer is in charge of the content. Mm-hmm. And so we would have, the shows aren't scripted, but we would have a rough, outline. We're meeting different people, talking to fishermen, talking to local scientists. And so each show has 5 acts, and we go through and learn about the fish, usually from a different person at a different location in each of the acts. And then the last, we all hope the last scene is with a big fish.
Yeah.
And so that Mongolia show, just to give you an example of why, I'm guessing that Mongolia show probably took about 18 days. It's 2 days, to get out there, 2 days to get back. Taimen, I don't know if you've ever had a chance to fish for Taimen.
No, many of my clients have, but I have not done it myself.
They're hard to catch. I mean, they're not, you don't go out and catch 20 in a day. You catch one in a day, especially if you're looking for a big one. So part of that time is just the time it takes to find the fish. Mm-hmm. And another example, the first show we ever did on Mekong giant catfish, a lot of these fish are critically endangered, almost extinct. That year that we filmed Mekong giant catfish, we filmed the only 2 fish that were caught that year.
Really?
That I know about anywhere. And so that show, that was a little bit of a unique case, but that show took about 5 weeks to film, and we never taken that long since then. But, that's the trouble. That's the trouble you get into is if you want to find a big fish that no one ever sees, it takes a long time.
Yeah. That's super interesting. So who, is it you that decides like where you're going and identifies the species and then where the best places are for that? Because that seems like a major part of this whole puzzle there.
Yeah. So I have my research at the university, and the research at the university is generating lists of these fish, gathering information about their ecology, their conservation status. And then based on those lists and that information, where the fish are found, we'll pitch maybe, like, let's say National Geographic said, they want 4 shows or 6 shows. We'll usually pitch 12 shows. And then they'll pick the 4, that sound the most interesting to them. So, they tend to pick the shows, where there's a big fish, where we have pretty good chances of getting a big fish. Doesn't hurt if the fish have teeth, or, and we even started doing shows. I'm primarily focused in freshwater, but we filmed 3 shows in Florida, or close to Florida. We filmed 1 show on Goliath grouper, 1 show on snakehead, which are in the canals and stuff in South Florida. And then we filmed a really cool show, or one that I really enjoyed, on South Bimini, on the hammerheads that are out there. Yeah. So those are 3 examples of shows that, I knew about those stories from my research, but wasn't a big focus of my research. But National Geographic said, hey, that sounds, Goliath grouper, great hammerheads. That sounds pretty good.
Did you catch the hammerheads or just dive with them?
Well, so every show's a little bit different. We typically will, fish, with fishing rods, but we'll also go out with scientists. In that show, we were with scientists, and we were using both rod and reel and like a drum line, when they have the big drum, like in Jaws, with the real thick monofilament line. Yeah. And so I think we caught a big bull shark on rod and reel. And then the big hammerhead that we got was with that thick monofilament and that drum. Yeah. And,
bigger hammerheads are no joke, man. Yeah.
Well, the drum, we were one of those big blue, I don't know if 50 gallon or however big those drums are. And it just disappeared underwater. And then we were looking around waiting for it to come back up.
That's some of the most popular shows that we've ever shot is when, the hammerheads come in for the tarpon migration, and they eat them regularly. And when there's a lot of activity, we've gone out there and caught those hammerheads on rod and reel. And the biggest one I think that we've gotten was around 13 and a half feet long. And that's no joke. That's a real fish.
They're beautiful. I mean, they're amazing.
Boat. Yeah, they really are.
Fish. Yeah.
They're amazing to watch them eat a tarpon too. It's not something that anyone who loves tarpon enjoys seeing, but you can't help but marvel at what an effective predator they are, and how they it just looks so effortless the way that they can get a super fast fish, like a tarpon, a really big fish, and and they get them, man. They get them. I've seen them,
and they can be pretty aggressive. I've seen what you're talking about, which is when they're chasing tarpon and they are aggressive and they don't give up. This South Bimini, where we were filming, they do what's called provisioning, where it basically means they feed them in a controlled way. And so the hammerheads they don't stay there year round. They come and they go, but they're used to the provisioning. And so you can swim with them. You go down there and you can swim with them and they don't pay any attention. They're not, those hammerheads I've seen cued in on tarpon. I wouldn't want to jump in between a hammerhead and a tarpon,
but they're pretty serious.
Yeah.
Did you
in South Bimini? It's cool.
Yeah. Did you swim off the end of that dock in that cage off the end of the dock at Bimini where the bull sharks come in and they feed them right there? They've got a shark cage just right off the dock. It's probably no more than 12 feet deep there, and you can get in that cage. And they've been provisioning these fish all year long, and these are massive, big, super aggressive bull sharks. And then you get in with snuba, and you're just right there, right by the dock. You don't have to go out in a boat. You don't have to do anything. And there are some of the most aggressive bull sharks I've ever seen in my life right there. And tourists are just dropping in that cage, man. And I'm telling you, if you stuck your arm out, it would get ripped off. That is cool. And you're in that perfectly clear water of Bimini. But I did it with my daughter. I mean, it's a big cage, and if you sit right in the middle, you're perfectly fine. There's no way that those sharks are getting in there, but it's the real deal, man. They're feeding them dolphin carcasses right over your head and slamming them on the surface. And those sharks get fed pretty much every day, and they're there. It's super exciting, especially if somebody likes to do something like that, but they get seasick. You don't have to go out in a boat. You don't have to do anything. And, you can even decide, I'd love to go shark diving today, but I don't know if there are going to be any sharks out there. You walk to that dock and you're like, oh, there's 8 of them right here. So I'm getting in that cage, or I'm not getting in that cage, or you can just watch from land or whatever. But one of the native Biminians has a nice little business going at the end of that dock.
That sounds great. I'll see if I can talk my son into doing that.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one. So a couple of fish I wanted to talk to you about that really have my attention is, one, the Arapaima is like absolutely number one on my list for a fish that I would like to catch on fly. That would be really awesome. I've got a lot of friends that have done it, and we've talked about the Arapaima on this show a number of times because I will make that trip one time. So Arapaima, where did you choose to go for the Arapaima?
Yeah, Arapaima, we went to Brazil and we went to Guyana.
Guyana, yeah.
And I think both places are good. There's a camp. You've probably talked to people who've been to this camp. We didn't fly. So there's a camp in Guyana that is famous for fly fishing for Arapaima.
Yeah.
And so if you were interested in that's probably what I would recommend first. Guyana is amazing. It's probably one of my favorite spots in terms of the diversity of fish that you can catch. So you can catch Arapaima, all different kinds of catfish, the Pyara, the vampire fish, wolffish, which is the giant Aymara. So there's so many cool fish in Guyana. So I think if you were interested in Arapaima, you wanted to have a good trip, beautiful country, amazing diversity of fish, really nice kind of wildlife experience. You'll go out on a boat, camp out for a week. That would be my recommendation. Yeah. We did 2 shows in Guyana, one on the Pyara vampire fish and the other one on wolffish. And it's an amazing country, very wild. Lots of big fish, really fun fishing, white sand beaches on the river. The river's fairly clear. You can see what's going on. So really, really nice trips.
In terms of like conservation and endangered species and that, where does the Arapaima sit in your opinion of threatened, or are they in good shape, or their habitat being kind of compromised, or where do you think that they are?
Yeah. So Arapaima is an interesting story, and in my mind, it's a positive story. So historically, up until like 10 or 20 years ago, Arapaima were overfished and you didn't see big ones anymore. They were kind of declared threatened, not, maybe not on the edge of extinction, but populations were declining. Fish were getting smaller, which that's what you kind of see with fish before they go extinct, as they start getting smaller and harder to find. Arapaima, one of the things that's kind of saved Arapaima is that they're not super migratory. And so they hang out in these floodplain ponds. And what's happened with Arapaima is communities have started to regulate the harvest. So they'll still harvest fish, but you can control how many Arapaima you have in an area and how big they get by controlling harvest. And so that's started to happen in a lot of communities. And in those communities where there are fishing regulations, you see the populations coming back. So that's actually been a nice story. It's a good conservation story. There's local empowerment, people kind of taking care of their resource, opportunities for recreational anglers. So I would say, in the scale of being an endangered species, Arapaima is doing better than most. Good. A lot of the Asian species are in bad shape. In the U.S., in the United States, we had historical drops in the late 1800s, early 1900s of a lot of our big freshwater fish in the U.S., but recently some of those fish have been coming back, so that's a good sign too.
Are you referring to the alligator gar at all, or
alligator gar, lake sturgeon?
Yeah.
American paddlefish to a certain extent, green sturgeon to a certain extent. What you see with a lot of these big fish, they have these big population declines, and they look like they're headed to extinction. And then if there's action taken, you can kind of stabilize the population, even if it's at a low level. And so alligator gar, for example, they're not found as many places as they used to be. But now populations in some areas like Trinity River in Texas, populations are coming back.
Yeah. That place seems to be really, prolific with them. I mean, certainly what I see on Instagram, they catch a lot of them there. And then one of my favorite videos that I've ever seen on Instagram is these pigeon eating catfish with the Wells catfish. And I saw that you've done that as well. And tell me about that fish. That is just, when I was a kid, I had this, this fascination with largemouth bass that would eat frogs, and then largemouth bass that would eat baby birds, like ducks, baby ducks. And I don't know why I had this fascination with it, but I mean, I just thought that was the coolest thing, that if you could find a bass that was big enough to eat a baby duck, that was the coolest. And I've always been fascinated with like catching one on like a bird lure, right? So even the trevally that eat the birds and all of this, it's just, I don't know why it's so fascinating to me, but it is. And that Wells catfish that eats those pigeons is an incredible predator, because when you watch the videos, it doesn't like go and attack one of these birds. It sucks them in from quite a distance, it seems like. I mean, like you can even put it in slow motion, and you see that like the fish's lips are not breaking the surface, but yet this pigeon just gets shot underwater, like with this incredible force. And I just find that fish to be really, really cool. And I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that one, and how you identified that one as one that you wanted to go and shoot for the show.
Yeah, Wells catfish. It's Europe's largest freshwater fish. In Western Europe, it's been introduced, so it's not a fish that normally occurred there. But we talked with an angler in Germany. He said in the 1970s, he loaded 30 baby Wells catfish in the trunk of his VW bug and drove from Germany to Spain and released these 30 catfish in the Ebro River in Spain. And ever since then, the population has been growing and growing. This happens a lot with non-native species, right. But the Wells catfish now is found throughout Western Europe, and they keep getting bigger and more abundant. The records keep, getting broken for the largest fish. So in the Ebro, like at first couple of years after we released them, you're getting 20-pound fish, then 50-pound fish, then 100-pound fish. I think the record is up to, I don't know if it's up to 300 yet, but they just keep getting bigger and bigger. And those pigeon eating fish are in a town in southern France. And I think it was on the Tarn River, and there are Wells catfish in that river up to about 9 feet long was the biggest one we saw. So maybe they're even bigger than that, because we probably didn't catch the biggest one. But they watching them eat the pigeons. What the scientists we work with there told us was it's actually the medium size, like the 4 or 5 foot Wells catfish that are good at eating the pigeons. Mm-hmm. When they get bigger than that, they're too fat, I guess, to.
They can't get in shallow enough water, I guess. They probably.
Yeah. And so
that makes sense.
And the pigeons are like, they're oblivious. So the pigeons are going down on this beach. You watch from a bridge up above. And so you sit up on the bridge and all the pigeons come down to bathe, and, they're making all this noise and getting their, whatever pigeon smell in the water. And the Wells catfish come up and they have long barbels. So you see the whiskers coming out of the water. And, once one of the whiskers makes contact with one of the pigeons, they'll come up and like you said, they'll try to swallow it. But the Wells catfish are not that good at it. And the pigeons are, not paying attention. Yeah. And so it's kind of funny because they'll try 5 or 10 times before they get one, and everyone's splashing around. It's like, no, they don't know what's going on. So it's really fun to watch. I mean, you mentioned animals or fish that will eat other animals. You remind me of taimen in Mongolia. Mm. We've seen a taimen washed up on shore that had an 8-pound muskrat in its belly.
Really? That
it seemed like maybe it swallowed that muskrat, and maybe the muskrat scratched one of its gills or something. And I'm guessing that's what happened. Something caused it to die, and that the muskrat maybe was trying to get out and got scratched one of the gills. And then we've also encountered another 5-foot taimen washed up on shore with it had swallowed a 3-foot taimen. Wow. And the tail of the fish it had swallowed was sticking out of its mouth, and it had also died, and its belly had ruptured. So some of the instincts that these fish have, they're amazing predators. Sometimes, amazing in terms of what they'll try to eat. Sometimes they're not successful.
Right. When you go back to the Wells catfish, before it was introduced into other places, was there any record of it getting the size that you're talking about now?
Yeah. So Wells catfish is one of those fish where there's stories of. I mean, I'm trying to remember what the record is. I want to say 770 pounds. Wow. If you go back and you look at the old literature, but when you start to dig into it, it becomes pretty clear that those records are not, they're not based on anyone actually seeing or weighing a fish. It's kind of a story that someone told someone who's told someone else. And these are stories from the 1800s or the 1700s. So in Eastern Europe, there are stories of what would be a world record fish, the biggest fish in the world, of these Wells catfish, but there are no verified. Mm-hmm. We don't start seeing like verified records until around 1900. And so there are no verified. When I say verified, I mean like a photo and with a weight that, you can tell someone actually weighed it rather than just made up a number.
Right.
So you start getting real documented records around 1900.
And in those documented records, are they consistent with what you're seeing now? What I'm asking, I guess, really is if you get a species that is introduced somewhere else where there's a lot more food and they're a predator that's never been seen before, and they go in and they just start cleaning house. Would that be possible for those to get to sizes that we've never seen before, or would the species be kind of restricted to a genetic size? Like it's going to get to a certain length, but then it's just going to get super fat, but it's probably not going to get over this general?
Yeah,
mass?
I mean, the answer is both. So, and this is something that I talk about in the book, but fish are limited by their genetics. But with Wells catfish, the fish that have been introduced into Western Europe, they keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. So we don't know. They haven't reached their potential yet. So we're sort of waiting to see how big they're going to get.
Yeah. I would imagine when you're eating pigeons pretty regularly, you're going to get pretty big pretty fast. I mean, that seems, especially when the pigeons
they eat carp,
really
they eat those big carp, and they're interesting fish. They're one of the only fish that we've caught, and we'll be filming them or whatever, and they'll actually like turn around and bite you. Just kind of, they seem like they're mad.
Yeah.
So they'll be sitting there and we're like, oh, look at this beautiful, Wells catfish. And they'll just turn around, and they have kind of the bristly teeth. They don't have, shark teeth or anything. So it's just great. It just is a scrape, but they can be pretty aggressive too.
Bite you kind of like a snake, but when you go, when you decide that it's time to shoot swordfish in the water, be extremely careful, because those things are like that. They exhibit behavior that I've not seen with any other fish. They will absolutely attack a diver, and the way they attack is to stick that sword straight through you, and they can easily do it. And I'm surprised more people don't get killed. We had a diver that got hit, and we were using a little scooter, one of those little underwater scooters, GoPros all over it. And if he hadn't have had that thing, it would have killed him. It hit that and went in about 8 inches and then broke the bill off. But I mean, that thing, and I've got a video of it where the fish is just going along and it sees the diver and then turns and goes with everything it's got right at the diver. Not like an accidental thing like you might get with a sailfish or, something that's just kind of, trying to fight away from the boat or whatever, and it might hit the diver. Or like a mackerel that's shaking its head and his mouth is open and somebody gets cut. It's like, it wasn't trying to bite you. It was just shaking its head and you happen to be in the way. That's not the case. That's not at all what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this fish turned and attacked the diver, and it's very dangerous. But that one,
it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting that some fish seem to know that some of these big fish know that they can hurt you, or that they have, a weapon. And some of the alligator gar, for example, it's my experience with alligator gars that they're totally harmless. The worst, the only real way they're going to hurt you is if you try to bring a big one on the boat and lands on your foot or starts struggling because you took it in the boat, breaks your leg or something. But some fish recognize that they have, that sword or sharp teeth or whatever, and other fish, even scary as they might look, are pretty harmless. Yeah.
I mean, and some are, I call them gentlemen. Like they've decided, okay, you win. I got it. I've given up. And then you handle them perfectly. They'll give you one good shake, and then it's like, okay, they'll lay perfectly still for you to get the hook out and let them go, or whatever you're going to do with them. But others are not that way at all. So the book, how long did it take you to write the book?
The book took 10 years.
10 years?
with
Even with COVID?
So with COVID, with the co-author, it was obviously it took a long time. And I've been doing this work for a long time now, almost 25 years, and really started focusing on large fish around 2005. We started doing the shows in 2007. And so the book, the shows focus on one fish. We're not really able to get into a lot of detail. We focus on some basic biology, basic angling, but we don't really tell in-depth stories. And so the book was a way, I think it's one of the only books that talks about these big freshwater fish on a global scale. And we really tried to tell the whole story from beginning to end. It starts in the Mekong, where I started my work, and then we go through the US into Europe, through Asia, Africa. So it's a global adventure. And that's one of the reasons that it took such a long time to write. It wasn't just sit down ping it out. We were going out in the field, and we were taking trips as we were writing.
Mm-hmm. And over the course of the 10 years that you're thinking about writing this book and actually starting to write it, did your opinion change on kind of what the book would look like? I'm sure this kind of evolved into something different than maybe when you started, with all these different experiences and what you're seeing and coming into contact with firsthand. How did that kind of shape into what it is today?
Yeah, it was a process. I think it was also a process with the Monsterfish shows. I don't know what your experience has been fishing in different. I mean, I think you fished all over, but for me, when I go to it's always a learning experience. When I go to a new spot, if it's an area where I haven't done research before, I'm meeting people for the first time. I'm seeing the fish for the first time. I'm learning how to fish for it, what its behaviors are, where it hangs out. So all of this has been a learning experience. The way that the book is structured is it starts with that world record fish in 2005 in Thailand. And then we sort of go through, this question, what is the world's largest freshwater fish? And talk about freshwater fish generally, go to the Amazon, where we have the highest diversity of fish in the world. And, then go to North America, learn about issues in North America. So it starts with sort of an introduction to these fish. What are they? Where are they found? Then we go into the threats, some of the challenges that they face. Then get closer to the end of the book, talking about conservation solutions and the future. So it's this arc of trying. Most of these fish, and I would say freshwaters generally they're facing a lot of challenges. So we wanted to be clear-eyed about that. We wanted to introduce these fish. What are they? Talk about how amazing they are, and then go on this global adventure that introduces people to all of these different fish, the threats they face, and hey, what can we do to protect them?
So that's what I'm most interested in. Have you come across solutions? Do you think there are solutions to protect these fish?
I mean, one of the big take-home messages is that these fish are doing better. Traveling around the world, you get a global perspective, and without fail, these fish are doing well where the people in that area have taken it upon themselves to manage those fish. So that's like, you have two options. There can either be no people. So you can go to the middle of the Amazon rainforest. Even in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, there are people, but you can either go somewhere where people are excluded and you might find these fish there, or you go to places where people have decided, okay, we're going to keep our rivers healthy. We're going to keep our fisheries healthy. And that's where you see these fish. And so, for example, I'd be curious to hear about your opinions of the situation in Florida. After visiting Florida and filming in Florida, I see Florida from perhaps a different perspective, where Florida is one of the only places in the world that I've been to that has sawfish, that has Goliath grouper, that has some of these big sharks that are still, you can still go out there and see. So I know that the issues, for example, in Florida are much more complicated than I can appreciate. But as someone who's been all over the world, Florida has amazing natural resources.
For sure.
And I think that's because people in Florida care. And there's a lot of people who care about fishing. There are a lot of good research being done. And so I know that can be messy at times, but it's what still exists in Florida is absolutely incredible.
Right. And you're exactly right. And it is really, really incredible. And a lot of it boils down to research and law enforcement and setting limits and seasons and things like that. And those are all super, super important. But another thing that is common, a common thread, is that fishing is giant tourism. There are billions of dollars associated with those fish. Seeing the fish that you mentioned, all of them. All of them are important, and I think that a lot of people in the state of Florida understand that the water needs to be clean, the fish need to be prolific, and we need fishermen to come down here. And I think that when you look at a fish like an Arapaima or something like that, and a small community can realize that there are great tourism dollars to be gained by embracing this fish and not killing it, that one fish is worth, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars to the community if it can be caught 5 or 6 times, right? Like, there are anglers that come down there, they're willing to pay whatever, they don't care what it costs. I mean, literally, people will travel the globe to add another species to their list, and they don't need to kill that species. They're happy to release that species, and they're happy to put their money into that community and come year after year after year after year and tell all their friends about it. And I think that that's a really, really important thing. I wonder if you covered that in your book about like how tourism and sport fishing, catch and release can not only benefit these fish, but make them benefit the communities in a way that they see that this is a sustainable resource that once was thought of as just, a meal, or not even a meal for the community. Like, they're catching this fish and putting it on a truck and sending it to the city. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we talk a lot about catch and release in the book, and you have examples of that in Florida with these communities with Arapaima, with taimen, both in Mongolia. Also, there's another species of taimen in Europe where fishing clubs are protecting these rivers in kind of the last places where the European taimen or European hucho is found, where these fishing clubs are practicing catch and release and protecting these rivers. So you see that all over the world, where some group of advocates, a lot of times it's anglers, sometimes it's scientists, people who care about the environment, have taken upon themselves to in a lot of cases, practice catch and release, keep the river or water clean, and protect the fishery. Another interesting example is with lake sturgeon. So lake sturgeon in Lake Winnebago up in Wisconsin, that's actually not catch and release. I don't know if you've ever seen that or heard about that. It's a spear. It's ice fishing. Right. It's spear. Yes, they use these pitchforks through the ice. Mm-hmm. So it's a harvest fishery of a fish that can live up to 150 years old. So you have to be very careful managing a harvest fishery where you're taking those big old fish out of the system. But they've been researching that population and protecting that population and their spawning grounds and everything for the last 70 or 80 years. And that's a big success story too. So I think that through line is, just the places where I still see big fish are the places where, people, where there's good science going on, where you have advocates for the fish, advocates for a healthy environment, and people have taken upon themselves to, protect the fish.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. Well, I know that we're a little bit short on time today, so I want to be respectful of that. And you've got this book, Chasing Giants. Where can people find your book?
Yeah, so there are 2 places to get the book. People can either pre-order on Amazon, just search Chasing Giants, Zeb Hogan, and it's available on Amazon. It's going to be out in print on April 25th. Or if people want to get it maybe a little bit more quickly and more directly, the book was published by my university press. It's called the University of Nevada Press.
Cool.
So Chasing Giants, University of Nevada Press, Google that. It'll take you right to a site where you can get the book. And I just got my copy today, so it's available.
There it is.
So would love it if. What
does that feel like? 10 years of work just sitting in your hand in a nice, neat package with a bow around it.
Doesn't weigh years of work, but I think people will really enjoy it. It's a kind of one book where people can really get introduced to all of these amazing, incredible big fish all over the world, and some of the, where they are, threats they face, and what people are doing to protect them.
Very cool. Well, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it. I learned a little bit about the Wells catfish for sure. That one is also on my list with the Arapaima. I'd like to do that. Do people fish for them there, or are they just watching me?
Oh, pigeons? Yeah. No, those are 2 good fish to have on your list, because both of those fish, you can go to a beautiful location, and within a couple days, you can get each of those. So
I'm 100% certain that I'm using a pigeon for bait. So hope that's legal. Anyway, okay. All right. Thanks, Zeb. I appreciate it. And you guys go check out his book, Chasing Giants, and also his show, very nice show on National Geographic, Monsterfish. Very good. So anyway, thanks, Zeb. I appreciate it. And we'll do it again one day.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. See ya.